Well, we're joined now by the former diplomat Annie Pforzheimer. She was the US Deputy Chief of Mission in Afghanistan between 2017 and 2018, and by Javad Ludin, who served as Chief of Staff to the Afghan President Hamid Karzai and also as the country's Deputy Foreign Minister. Welcome to you both. Mr. Ludin, first of all, do you think the Afghan government can win this war against the Taliban?
Yes, potentially it can, but under the circumstances, it's an extremely disadvantageous situation. The Taliban have the momentum, and the way that the withdrawal of the US and NATO forces has taken place, and also the way that the transition has not really been managed well, has put the Afghan government side in an extremely weak situation. So I think I'm extremely worried for the situation for the time being. There's an extremely urgent need for an intervention that will have to come from the outside. Intervention
from
political,
whom?
I mean. Sadly, the way the US managed the transition, the way that the whole withdrawal of troops was announced and executed, has put the US in a situation where there is very little leverage right now that the US and NATO have. There are many actors that have come in now into the fray, and they have probably equally important voices now. Pakistan is perhaps the most important country right now. So what is required is, when I say intervention, and now the US being in a relatively weaker situation than it was before, ideally it will have to come from the UN. The United Nations Security Council has to convene. It has to bring regional powers. It has to bring in Western NATO powers and the United States, and they have to really put a stop to this, to the current. The military push for takeover of power, because the military push for takeover of power is not going to return Taliban simply to power like they used to have it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It will lead to a civil war. It will lead to a breakdown of the state institutions in Afghanistan.
Okay.
And it
sorry to interrupt you. I just want to bring in Annie Pforzheimer here, because you talked about the withdrawal of the US troops. Annie Pforzheimer, the US launches an invasion, stays in Afghanistan for decades, and then withdraws abruptly. Do you think that was responsible behavior?
I think that the way that this withdrawal was announced, and the fact that all conditions were lifted from the US troop presence, the giving of a deadline, and honestly, the lack of planning that was manifest in the contradictory statements about how we were going to support our Afghan allies, all of it was very poorly managed. It was a strategic error, in my view, and it has led to this demoralizing effect on Afghan forces at the moment that they badly need to be able to push back on the Taliban, because the Taliban do not speak for Afghanistan, but they are willing to commit acts of terror in order to take as much territory as possible and to try to negotiate their way into power.
So we could see a future where the Taliban becomes the strongest force in Afghanistan. How do you think the US will react to that?
Well, at this moment, I can't see the US reacting adequately. I think that the United States should be making statements about our interest in sanctioning the Taliban for what they are doing, engaging the United Nations in a mediation role, or as a fact-finding body that can determine who is committing atrocities. The US could make a statement that it plans to continue its air support for the Afghan security forces. There are many ways that the United States government could be managing its support for the Afghan Republic and all of our allies and the vulnerable populations that believed in the project that we said we were conducting together of democracy and human rights.
Javad Ludin, US troops couldn't have stayed in the country forever. There is a responsibility on the part of the Afghan government, and it seems that we're seeing a lack of leadership. I mean, why isn't the president on the front line? Why are the troops so demoralized?
Well, I don't think that staying for the U.S. troops in a combat position was anybody's position. I mean, we in Afghanistan for many years. In fact, we've been calling for a transition to take place. But I think it's really the manner in which this transition was announced. Right up to the last minute, they were involved in all sorts of combat operations, and then suddenly there's just pulling the carpet from under their feet, the feet of the Afghan Republic, was what was shocking. The Afghan government, obviously, I mean, we take responsibility for what is there as Afghans, but what I'm basically saying is right now, the way that the United States handled the peace process over the last 2 to 3 years, where basically giving the Taliban the legitimacy, the political wherewithal, regional acceptance, all those things have combined, giving Taliban the kind of emboldened position right now that they're using to actually overrun provinces.
Okay,
this would not have been
quickly...
thinkable until a couple of years ago.
Okay, let's just quickly go to Annie Forsheimer. There's no incentive for the Taliban to negotiate. They're winning.
I think that is how they feel, and I think that's a very fair statement right now. I also believe, as does Jawed, that there are ways for the Afghan forces and people to fight back. But what they need is the international community to do its part. And as he said, we gave them too much legitimacy. We took them at face value that they were interested in negotiating. They're not.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're running out of time. Annie Forsheimer, Javad Ludin, thank you both very much for joining us.